A state of emergency has been declared in the French Pacific territory of New Caledonia for the next 12 days in an attempt to quell unrest that has left 5 people dead, including 2 police officers. Plans over new voting rules from French lawmakers prompted the latest violence. The former French colony became an overseas territory after World War II. It has rejected independence in referendums 3 times. But the cause retains strong support among the indigenous Kanak people.
Security forces are leaving Paris on a mission to bring the situation in New Caledonia under control. What they will find 17,000 kilometers away in the South Pacific are the scars of the worst unrest in 3 decades. Rioters and police officers were killed and dozens of businesses torched in 3 days of violence. In parts of the capital, Noumea, residents themselves were forced to act to restore order on the streets.
Everything's burning. People have literally no limits because they are literally shooting at each other. No, I've never seen this much violence.
Tensions in France's former colony and now its overseas territory run deep. But after the parliament in Paris expanded voting rights to include French residents who have lived in New Caledonia for 10 years, the situation exploded.
We feel oppressed. We are angry. Everything is taking place over there. And us? We are wondering, are we being heard? We, the Kanak people?
It is a Caledonia that is not recognizable today. We talk about sharing, we talk about time to talk, but Caledonia is not what you think. I'm a New Caledonian, and I no longer know my country anymore. France has imposed a 12-day state of emergency to quell the unrest. 1,000 soldiers and police officers sent from Paris are due to join the 1,700 already on the ground.
All right, I'm joined now by Matthias Kowasch. He just co-edited a book entitled The Geographies of New Caledonia, Kanak. He is a professor of geography and economics. He joins us this evening from Vienna. Professor, it's good to have you with us. I know that you have lived in New Caledonia. You've studied it for decades. Some residents there are saying that the last few days have felt like a civil war. What is your take? Is that what you're seeing happening?
To my point of view, civil war is still a big word, but we have seen demonstrations that turned violent. And I think if the situation can become a civil war like in the 80s, that's what people fear, that remember the violent events, or the French call it, events from the 80s.
In a territory that you say is now, what, about 50% in favor of independence, this constitutional change from 17,000 miles away in Paris, does it feel like, to the people there in New Caledonia, does it feel like actions being taken by a former colonizer?
It feels like a betray, because since 1998, since the Noumea Accord, so New Caledonia has a restricted electorate. So people who arrived after 1988 even have to be lived 20 years on the territory to be eligible to vote in the provincial elections and for future referendums about political independence. And when they arrived after 1998, they can't even vote. Mm-hmm. So, which means this is the basis that pro-independence parties and loyalist parties and the French state negotiated together in the 1990s, after the events, or civil, if you want to call it a civil war, in the 80s. And now, without any new consultations and negotiations, the French government want to change this compromise that has been found together in order to change the electorate.
Well, yeah, I want to just ask you, the indigenous people, the Kanak people, they make up about 41% of the population there. That's sizable. Why didn't France speak with them and with the pro-independence movement people first?
The thing is that we had three independents about political independence in 2018, 2020, and 2021. And they were all negative against independence. But the third referendum was boycotted by pro-independence parties and by most of the Kanak people. And because of the COVID pandemic, and the French government, so they asked to postpone the third referendum. The second referendum was very close, so 47% voted in favor of independence, and there were hopes that the third referendum would be in favor of independence. And so they asked the French government to postpone the referendum because of the COVID pandemic. And the French government said, no, we don't want to postpone it. Then they boycotted the referendum. For them, the third referendum was illegal, not really democratic. It didn't participate.
Professor...
And for the French government, it was a normal referendum. And so it counts. And they voted against independence, over 90%, because Kanak people didn't participate mostly. And so that's difficult to start negotiations again after that third referendum.
Yeah, I mean, it's a complicated history, too. We appreciate you, though, taking the time to explain it to us tonight. Matthias, Kowasch, the co-editor of the book, The Geographies of New Caledonia, Kanak. Thank you.
Let's get more from Nathalie Mrgudovic. She's a teaching fellow at the Aston University in the UK, specializing in French politics and French overseas territories. Welcome to DW. More security personnel have now arrived from France. Will they be able to quell the violence?
Well, hopefully, that's the point. But I don't think that the solution will be with using more strength. We need to establish dialogue. That is the main thing.
This violence was triggered this time by anger over France's plan to impose new voting rules, but it's been simmering for decades, hasn't it?
Exactly. But actually, it's not simmering for decades. That's a bit wrong. New Caledonia has benefited from a very large autonomy, a regime that was implemented by what we call the Accord de Matignon-Oudinot and then Accord de Nouméa, which gave New Caledonia a very large autonomy with, at the end of this process, which was supposed to take place in 2019, 2020, there should be 1 to 3 referendum on self-determination, where the population of New Caledonia would decide whether they wanted to become independent or not. However, there were 3 referendums that took place in 2019, 2020, 2021. However, the one in 2021, the pro-independence movements objected to the dates because it was, remember, the context of COVID, etc. So they considered that the third referendum was not dealt with or implemented in the right conditions because the pro-independent didn't have the time to, for example, to campaign, to mobilize the population even more. And that's from there that actually the anger has been brewing, really. And it exploded now because of this bill on the constitutional reform to expand the electorate to take part in the provincial elections.
You were talking about the referendums, and therefore I need to ask you, any independence movement that exists in New Caledonia, how strong is it, and is it being driven by the indigenous Kanak people?
Yes, it's mostly driven by them, and it is important. The Kanak population represents around 42% of the entire population of New Caledonia, which amount to 270,000 people. But let's talk about the political importance. And that I want to say, with the 3 referendums, the first one and the second one, the pro-independence gained about 43 and then 47% of the vote. So you can see the importance. It's almost 50-50.
Right. Thanks for breaking that down for us. We'll have to leave it there for the moment. But thanks for joining us today, Nathalie Mrgudovic from Aston University in the UK.